Welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's part of our Zenphi Automation Stories series. My name is Arvind and I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Zenphi. Today I'm going to show you how you can easily automate some of the common Google Workspace administration tasks using Zenphi. So I'll be going over a typical onboarding, offboarding scenario and how it can be easily automated using Zenphi. I'll also cover some other common scenarios like email signature management, group creation, password reset, etc. So, a few housekeeping points before we get started. This session is being recorded, and we'll send out the recording to everyone who has registered in a few days. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. However, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to get those answered as well. So there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. So please share your feedback as it helps us shape our upcoming webinars. For those of you who complete the survey, you also stand a chance of winning a Zenphi wireless charger. So please make sure you stick around till the end of the webinar. So with that, let's jump into the webinar. So first things first, why do you need to automate your processes at all? So as you know, a lot of the workspace administrative processes can be manual, repetitive, and time consuming. That means more opportunities for human errors and inconsistencies when you execute those processes. So by automating them, you can streamline your process and making sure that it runs the exact same way every time and reduce all of these errors from happening and freeing up your valuable time to focus on more business critical activities. For those who are new to the platform, I would like to take this opportunity to give you a quick overview of what Zenphi is. Zenphi is a no-code automation platform that is built for Google Workspace and runs on Google Cloud. With Zenphi, you can easily automate your business processes with a few drag and drops without having to write any code. Since Zenphi is built for Google Workspace, it has tight integration with most of the Google Workspace apps, such as Drive, Gmail, Docs, and Sheet, just to name a few. On top of Google Workspace apps, Zenphi also has connectors to other third-party systems like Salesforce, HubSpot, SendGrid, DocuSign, etc. This allows you to leverage your existing investments in those tools that you already are familiar with. Zenphi has all the necessary components to automate any kind of business processes. For example, leave requests, expense approvals, generating quotes and proposals, working from home agreements, employee onboarding, offboarding scenarios, just to name a few. When it comes to automating a process in Zenphi, what we say is if you can lay out your process in a flowchart, you can automate it with Zenphi. So some of you would already have been automating some of the Google Workspace administrative tasks using other existing tools. GAM is quite popular among Google Workspace admins. It provides a command line utility to perform common tasks. You can string together these commands in a script to automate certain scenarios. AppScript is also another popular option for automating. Both of these approaches require some form of scripting or coding. So you have to then update and manage these code files. Making changes to these scripts to match the new business requirements can be time consuming and complicated. For example, say if you need to get an approval as part of creating a new group, then that becomes difficult to script it with these tools. So this is where a tool like Zenphi shines. Not only can you automate everything using just drag and drop, changing your automation to cater for new requirements becomes a breeze. Let me take a moment to explain the hierarchy of Zenphi. So when you sign up for Zenphi, a Zenphi workspace is provisioned for you. A workspace is a dedicated tenancy and a data sovereignty boundary. So the workspace is provisioned in one of the Zenphi zones. We currently have three zones, a US, Australia, and EU zones. All the data that is stored in Zenphi workspace will be held in that zone. So you might have legal requirements of where the data should be stored. So make sure you select the right geographic zone that will comply with your requirements. Within a workspace, you can have multiple spaces. So you can think of a space as a logical container for a process. So when you're automating a process, you will have multiple assets that are related to it, such as automations of flows, tables to capture data, AI models, and dashboards. So a space allows you to group all of them together, and it also lets you invite users to come and collaborate within that space. So let me switch over to the browser and let's have a look at all of this in action. So this is the Zenphi user interface. And when you sign up for Zenphi, this is a workspace that you get provisioned. And within the workspace, you can see we have multiple spaces already created in my demo workspace. You can see for different process, like for example, for the accounts payable process, we have a space. For the incident report process, we have a space, etc. So let me jump into a space so that we can see what's involved. So for the incident report space, you can see I have my automation or flows here. I have tables here. I can also have AI models, and you can see I have a bunch of dashboards that are created for this space as well. Let me jump into the flow so that we can take a look at how we have built the automation. So here you can see the automation. It looks like a flow chart. I'll go a bit in depth on the designer shortly, but for now, yeah, if you can lay out your process as a flow chart, you can see you can easily build that and automate it in Zenphi. So once you have your flow automated and it's running in the background, you might want to collect some key metrics that you are interested in. Like, for example, in our scenario for the incident report, things like the date it got reported, or the type, or the reported by, and reported on. These are the fields that are important for our process. So we have created a table to capture them, and throughout the flow, we are capturing all that information. So once we have this information captured, we can easily create business dashboards within the space so that it can show us breakdowns by the incident type or the number of incidents reported by the office. And you can also create custom dashboards that are specific to your specific requirements. You can invite people into this space so that they can come and look at the dashboards and get insights into your process. So that's one of the benefits of Zenphi. So it's not only automation, you can also gather insights and build business dashboards, invite people to come and collaborate in the space as well. So let's start automating a process. So the first step of automating a process is to create a space for it. So I can come here and click on the Create New Space button. This will take me to the Create New Space page where I can create an empty space. By clicking Create, I can give it a name, a description, and also I can choose an icon for it. Now, this will create you an empty space. Alternatively, we also ship Zenphi with some pre-built templates. So these are common scenarios that we come across in terms of automation. So for example, code generation, incident report. So if I go into this template, it gives me a brief overview of what this template does, and then I can go ahead and create that. So if I provision this template, it comes with pre-done flows, tables, dashboard pages, etc. So you get an idea of how you can easily build things with Zenphi, and then you can start customizing them to your specific requirements. So for the admin, Google Workspace admin automation use case, we also ship a Google Workspace admin template. Now, this template is packed with flows that cover common scenarios, such as updating email signatures, resetting passwords, employee onboarding and offboarding, creating groups, etc. So for this demonstration, I'll be using this template. Now I have gone ahead and already created the template. So let me come back to my spaces and let me jump into the space that I already created for this admin use case. So within this space, you can see all of our preloaded workflows or flows. So want to create a new Google group, employee offboarding, onboarding, exporting data from Vault, password reset request, and update email signature. So before I jump into any of these flows, let's actually look at what is involved in automating something. So the first step of automating is to create a flow. So I click on create flow, and then I'm presented with this screen. So we need to decide how our flow is started. So there are various ways a flow in Zenphi can be started or triggered. So you could trigger it by a Google form submission. You could monitor an inbox and automatically trigger a flow whenever an email is received in that inbox. Similarly, you can monitor a folder in Google Drive, and if someone uploads a file, you can kick off a flow. You could run flows on a schedule. This is great for end of month reports or something that you need to do every Friday, 5 p.m., for example. Or you can have flows that run on demand, which is great for ad hoc processes. And you get a run now button, you click on that, and the flow runs. And we also have an HTTP API trigger. This is a great trigger if you have another third-party system that is capable of making a webhook call. You can use the HTTP API trigger so that your third-party system can directly invoke Zenphi, pass data, and then you can kickstart your process based on that. So for our demo purposes, I'm just going to use the on-demand flow trigger. So I click create on that. And we are now inside the Zenphi designer. So this is the Zenphi designer where you will be dragging and dropping and automating a process. This area is called the Zenphi canvas, which is where you'll be building your logic, which resembles a flowchart. On the left-hand side, you can see the toolbox. So you can see we have these are the various actions that you can perform as part of your flow, and we have grouped these actions into all of these categories. Now, since we are built for Google Workspace, you can see we have extensive coverage across all Google Workspace apps. Like, for example, you can do certain things in Google Drive. You can copy an item, you can move an item, delete an item, etc. Or in Google Sheets, you could look up rows, you can read rows, update rows, etc. We also know that when you're automating things, it's not only um, Google Workspace apps that you might use. You also need to use other third-party applications as well. So Zenphi ships with a lot of connectors to a lot of third-party applications like task management systems like Asana or Salesforce or Twilio if you want to send a SMS, etc. Now we are always adding more and more actions and integrations. So if there is something that you require that Zenphi doesn't support, please reach out to us and we can work with you to make that happen. So now that we have the empty flow, automating is as simple as dragging and dropping an action. So I can just drag an action from here and just drop it in this place. And basically, this means that once the trigger is invoked, this will be the first action that runs. And you can see that it has a red outline because it's not configured. I can hit the settings and I can go ahead and configure the options without having to write any code. So it's all drag, drop, and configuration based. So rather than building the onboarding scenario here, let me, conscious of time, let me just jump back into the flows list where we have this employee onboarding that got created um, because we provisioned this space based off a template. So I'll click on that. It'll take me to the flow dashboard and I'll say edit flow. And you can see this is the sample employee onboarding scenario that we have automated. Now, we did a webinar um, a few weeks back that covered employee onboarding and building it. So feel free to go back and look at it as well. So in this scenario, what we have done is we have used a Zenphi form trigger to kickstart the process. So Zenphi Forms is similar to Google Forms, but it has a few more features and it is tightly integrated into Zenphi. So you can see this form has two sections. We basically capture the first name, last name, personal email address, and then some other information like what's your manager's email address, organization units, cost centers, groups, etc. So we're going to use this information in order to provision user accounts, add them to the specific groups, and then send a welcome email to the user as well. So the way you build the logic is by using the actions and dragging them and dropping them on this designer canvas. So for Google Workspace Administration, Zenphi has a lot of actions pre-built in. So if we look inside the Google directory category, you can see things like you can add aliases, add members to groups, you can create groups, you can assign licenses, you can delete users, you can remove aliases, you can automatically sign out users, and also you can transfer users' data. So in an offboarding scenario, if you're deleting the user, you can transfer all of their data to some other user. You can update users, and you can do license management as well by looking at revoking a license or listing out all the available licenses and assigning a license. Um, we also have a lot of other administrative actions, things like creating forwarding addresses, creating delegates, creating calendar delegates, creating filters in Gmails, creating labels, updating signatures, etc. And we also have a few Google reseller actions as well. So if you're a Google reseller, you can also automate some of your tasks using Zenphi. So for this scenario, we're going to create a user. So I'll come here and click on the settings. So the first thing is you can see that some fields we have already populated, some fields it's marked as an error. So we need to specify the primary email. So the way you can specify these values, anywhere you see an input, basically you can type in a value. So I can say John Doe at .com. Or in this scenario, we are actually going to get this value dynamically from the form. So wherever you see this icon, that means you can insert a dynamic token. So I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to go to my trigger, because in here, I know I'm capturing the preferred company email. So that is going to be the primary email. And then we need a password. So we will go ahead and generate a random password soon. And you can see I have similarly gone and updated the first name, last name, email, manager's email, cost center, and organization units. So the next thing I need to do is I need to generate a password. So for that, I can come back into the Google directory category, and then we have an action in here called generate password. So I'll drag and drop it here. So I just specify, I'll leave it with the defaults. You can tweak that. And then I'll come back into the create user action, use the token picker and say, now I want to use the output of the generate password action as my password. So this is how you can pass information from one step into another. So um, any step that has executed before the current one, you have access to its outputs. So I have now created the user, and the next thing is we have this condition to check, should we add them to a group? Because in the form you may specify groups or you may not specify groups. So that means we need to make a branching decision. So if you come into our control flow sections, you can see there are a lot of control flow statements that you can use. In this case, we have used a simple if condition. So if I open this and look at the filter, we are saying if the except when the groups is null, you do this action. So in that case, if it's not null, that means if you have specified a value for it, we're gonna split the group emails by comma. So in case if you have multiple email addresses, multiple groups, I mean group email addresses, then we loop through that, and then we can assign this newly created user to those groups, right? And finally, we're going to notify them. So I can come back here and say, here are all the things. And then I also want to send them the password that we generated so that they can use that to log in. So this is how easily you can uh, create dynamic content with typed values as well as values coming from tokens as well. And that's how easily you can template out your values. In this case, we are templating out the body of an email. So we're going to use this person to do it. Now, the way Zenphi interacts with a third-party system, like for example, in order to create a user, is by using a connection. So here I already have a connection configured with this account. So this is an administrative account, admin account that I own on this Open Idea domain that has administrative privileges so that I can go and create a user. If you don't have a connection, you can click on create new connection, give it a name, click on authorize, and it will pop up a Google authorization flow where you will log in with your Google account, and then we will establish a trustful relationship. So these actions, so I'm just going to cancel this because I already have a connection. So these actions operate on behalf of this person, so on behalf of this user that you have authorized, right? So that way you can limit access based on the required permissions that you are trying to do. And for example, if you need a read-only access, you can just create a read-only connection to Google Drive, for example. Now, for some of our other actions, like for example, inside the Google Workspace category, in here, like for example, if you want to create a Gmail delegate, for this, you actually need a new type of connection, which is a service account-based domain-wide delegated connection. So now, if you have used GAM, um, uh, you will know it is a similar way that we do it as well. We have a documentation here that goes into detail of how you set this up, because this one is a bit involved. You need to configure certain things in GCP, configure certain things in Google Workspace. So basically, what that means is that you will have to go and create a service account inside a Google Cloud project, get hold of the OAuth client ID, and then jump into your domain-wide delegated settings for your Google Workspace. Click Add New, put that client ID in here, and add the required OAuth scopes. So our help documentation goes into detail of how that is done. And again, if you have used GAM before, you would have done a similar thing there as well. Once you have that, I would go and create a credential file here. I'll download, so it'll be a JSON file that I download to my machine. And then inside Zenphi, basically, I will browse and select that JSON file in here. And this creates a service credential delegated account. So, using that, I could, for example, I have this connection already. I could say I want to do this for this email address, and I want to delegate to something else. So you get more control over how you want to perform these actions. So all of these actions inside the Google Workspace category use a delegated service credentials, domain-wide delegated access in order to do these actions. But if you are using actions in, say, Google Directory to create a user, you don't need to use a delegated action. If you are an admin, you can just use your admin account to go and create the users. So let me just remove this. Now this flow is fully configured. So let's kick this one off. So let me publish this. Perfect. And once it's published, I'll come here to the trigger and I'll go to invocation, and this will give me the URL for the form. So I'll just open up the form here, and I'll say I'm going to log in with this person. So I'll just quickly enter some values in here so that we can see this in action. So first name is John, last name is Doe, personal email address. I'm just going to put this email address as their personal email address. Preferred company email, john.doe at anidea.com. Title, say the developer. Manager's email, again, I'll just put this one. Org unit, I'm going to put them in R&D. I'm not going to specify cost center. I'll select the start date as the 20th. I'll apply. I'm not going to specify any groups, or if I wanted to, I can just specify groups, comma separated groups. So I've done that. Now I'm going to submit this. Now, here I'm specifying the email that is being created. Now you can also compute this within the flow itself by using the first name and the last name, but for this demonstration purposes, I'm just going to upfront specify that. So now that it's submitted, I can come back into the flow dashboard, and you can see there's already an execution happening for this flow. So if I click into this, it will then show me exactly where it is at in terms of the flow. So you can see the trigger came in, it has already formatted, and the date, generated the password, it's already created the user. It checked if we needed to add them to a group. In our case, we didn't. And then finally, it went and notified the user, and the flow is now completed. So if I switch back into the account where I said to send the email, and you can see the welcome email with the username and the temporary password that we generated as well. So that is how easy it is in Zenphi to drag, drop, and automate a scenario. One of the strengths of Zenphi is how easy it is to make changes to your process. So let me jump back into this process onboarding. And let's say a new requirement is when we create the user, we have some standard labels that we would like to add to their Gmail account. So, and let's say we have those labels stored in a Google Sheet that we will want to reference and automatically add it to this newly created user. So I can come into the Google Sheets category. I can drag drop a read rows action, and I will go and create a connection. So with this, and then I will use the Google Drive file picker to go and select the file. So now I have this file in my webinar folder, and it's called labels. And the sheet name for it is sheet 1. Now here it says, do you want to read a range of rows? I'll tell it to read all the rows, and I'll say I have a header. Then if I click on load columns, Zenphi can automatically go and analyze and say, I have found a label column called label in there. It's in column A. So if I come here, hover over this file, I can open this file here, and you can see, we have the header of the sheet, and then we have some sample labels in here. So I'm going to read all of those labels, and then I can use a for each um, looping statement to say, I have read a collection of rows. Now I want to loop through all of those rows. And for each of that, I would like to go and create a label in Gmail. So I can come to Google Workspace Action and say, um, create Gmail label. And then here, and this is where I will be using my domain-wide delegated credential connection. And then for the user email, I will say this is the primary email of the new user that I created it. And what is uh, the name of the label? That is basically the row column A of the sheet. And I can specify certain other options as well. But for this case, this is sufficient. So basically now I have read a set of labels that I have in the sheet. I can loop through that and automatically create those labels for that user. And then, for example, as the next step, if I also wanted to automatically set up specific filters that we use across our company, so I could just come and say, for example, using this create Gmail filter action, I could come and say, hey, for this current user, using this connection, I want to automatically do something if it contains the word called secret. For example, I want to add a label called secret. So that is how easy it is for you to make changes to your flow. Just a matter of finding the relevant action, drag and dropping it, and building the logic. Now, if you are to script this out, or using a scripting, or using app sheets, you can see app script, you can see how difficult it'll get in terms of making some of these rapid changes. So this is where using a no code tool such as Zenphi would make your life much more easier, and you can do a fair bit of automation of your processes. Let me switch back into the flow list. So I don't want to save these changes. That's okay. So let's jump into the next scenario, which is employee offboarding. So I'll go to the flow dashboard again for the employee offboarding flow and go to edit flow. Now again, we have implemented a very simple scenario. Let me start with the trigger. So we have a Zenphi form here. And in the Zenphi form, we've configured to say, enter the email address of the user that you want to offboard, and what is the recovery email that we should set, and what is the action that we should take. So either we suspend the user, we delete the user, or we archive the user. And then we say, if you selected delete user, do you want to transfer the data to another user or not? And if you say yes, then we say, what do you want to transfer, or who do you want to transfer the data to? So this will be the new user account where all the data is transferred. So let's look at the overall logic of the flow. So typically what we do is when we are offboarding a user, first is to go and reset their passwords, change their recovery emails, etc., so that which will prevent them from logging in. So we do that. So we grab hold of the user that was entered in the form, and then we go and change the recovery email and the password fields to a new recovery email, and we reset the password. And then we have this switch statement. So depending on the option that you selected for the offboarding action, if it was suspend, delete, or archive, we go and do different things. So if you had selected suspend, we have this suspend user action in here. And then we basically say we want to suspend the user. If you selected delete, then we come and check, did you also say you wanted to transfer the data to another user? And if that is true, we have this transfer user data action. So this action is a similar action that you would see if you go and delete a user in the Google Workspace Admin uh, console. Then it'll basically say what is the user ID you're trying to delete, and what is the user that you want to transfer to, and what are the applications you would like to transfer, drive and docs, and then you have all the options similar to what you get in the admin UI. So then once we transfer the user, then we go ahead and delete the user. And similarly, if it's archive, we can go and archive the user instead. So you can see how easily we can even achieve an end-to-end offboarding scenario. Now, you might already have an ITSM system where people log the requests, but typically that means that you still have to do certain things manually. So Zenphi can come in there and basically help you with the last mile effort so that you can have your whole thing automated from end to end. So, mindful of time, I'm not going to run this flow so that we can talk a bit more about the other scenarios as well. So let me go back to the flow list again. Another interesting scenario is email signature management. So we have a sample flow that does that. So let me jump into the designer. Now, there might be multiple reasons why you would want to centrally manage email signatures. One thing, you can ensure everyone is on brand and using the latest signatures. You may have a campaign that's running. Marketing might run a campaign and want specific banners that are added to all of the sales team, for example. So all of these scenarios you can easily automate through Zenphi. So let's look at this flow. So basically, this is an on-demand flow. We are saying we're going to use a get all users action to find users in this domain. Now we can have some other restrictions to say pull them from a specific department or an org unit. And then we have created an email template inside a Google Doc file. So let me hover over here and open that quickly. So it's a very simple template, and we have a couple of placeholders where we want to replace the name and their title in here, and the email address here as well. Um, then what we do is we use this export docs to HTML actions, where we take that Google Docs template and we convert that to HTML. Then for all the users that we have found from the query, we loop through that and we use this uh, the replace placeholder action here to transform that HTML and say for all of the tokens that we have added in the HTML, replace that with the current user's full name, their title, and their primary email address, and then use that to go and set their signature. So this is how easy it is for us to quickly automate even a scenario like setting email signatures. And then it can get as fancy as you need it. And you could have something that does this periodically. You could do it for campaigns. And when the campaign finishes, you can revert them back to the standard email signature. So you can see how powerful it could be. And basically, whatever your business requirements are, you can model that with Zenphi. So let's jump back into the flow list again and look at the next scenario. And I'm going to cancel the changes. Next up, let's see how we can automate a Google group creation. So we have a flow already for that. So I'll jump into the designer. So imagine that you're getting a lot of requests for to create groups, and this has been a manual task. So here, what we have done is we have created a Zenphi form, which basically says, "Hey, tell us what the email address you need, what's the name of the group, the description, and who should be the owner." And who are the members in here? So each department owner, for example, they will fill this out, and that will come to IT. And what we do is we assign a task to IT to so that IT can approve this group or not. So in that case, we have another Zenphi form. We pass the information saying that who has requested this, what is the group name that they have asked. So we have setting a default value with the name that they specified so that IT can go and override this if they want to. Same thing for the group email address, and then the group description, the list of group owners and group members as well. And finally, IT can either approve or reject, and they can leave a note. So based on their uh, if they have selected approve or reject, we then basically go and check if they have approved it or not. If they haven't approved it, we can send an email to the requester to say, hey, this has been declined by IT for here is the reason for that, and then we can terminate the flow. But if IT has approved it, then we just go ahead and create that group with all the information that they have specified, and then also go and update the group so that we can set the owners for that group as well. If there are members, we can loop through the members and add them to the group as well. So that is and finally we go and notify the requester saying that the group has been created. So that is how easy it is for us to automate the entire group creation process. Also adding the manual approval step inside the flow so that there is another there are checks and balances so that the IT can actually decide if they want to allow this request to go ahead or not. So that is how easy it is for us to bring a human in the loop when we are designing an automated process with Zenphi. So I'll jump back into the flow list again. So Zenphi also has integrations with Google Vault. So for compliance reasons, if you need to export a user's data when they leave the organization, and if you want to store it in cold storage, you can automate that with Zenphi as well. So I'll jump into this flow. And the way we do that is inside our toolbox, inside Google Vault, we have actions to create an export, get the status of the export, so that we can manage the whole Google Vault export process. So in this scenario, basically we have a Zenphi form here. We find out which user we want to do the export on, and we need to create a connection that has Google Vault access with it. We select which matter that we are interested in, and then we can pick which service we want to do. So Gmail, Drive, Groups, and Chat, and we give a name for the export. And then these are all the options that you can also select when you're doing an export through the Google Vault UI. So we can configure all of that and say I want to export this in an mbox format. And then once the export is uh, um, queued, we get an export ID, and then we go and check the status of the export because it'll be a long running operation and it might take a while for us to complete that. So for the given matter, we go and check, give us the status of the export. The output of this action basically has the status that will tell us if this is completed or not. So we have another if condition here that we basically go and say, hey, is the status equal to completed? That means the export is completed. Otherwise, we say just pause for 1 minute and then we do the check again because we are in this outer loop. However, if it is completed, then what we do is as part of the export, we do get the items that have been exported. So these will be the zip files of your inbox format data, the checksum files, the XML files that are created as part of the Google Vault export. So then we loop through all the files, and then we have this copy to Google Cloud action. So we would create our own Google Cloud Storage bucket, and then from the source bucket that was created for us from the export, we will copy it into our own target bucket here, and then with the same name as well. So this way, we will transfer the data across to our bucket. Then we have that forever, or we can transfer it to some other cold storage if we want to. So using this approach, you can fully automate even Google Vault related activities with Zenphi. So if you're using Vault for compliance purposes, then you can easily automate that as well. Grab all of their data, put it into cold storage, and then potentially delete the user so that you free up an account if you're not using the archived user licenses. So let me again jump back into the flow. The final scenario I would like to quickly cover off today would be resetting passwords. So I'll jump into the designer. So you can also create a automated flow in Zenphi that allows people to submit a password reset request. So we have a form here that basically says, I want to reset password for me or for on behalf of someone else, and then they can specify the details. And basically, we can come and say, getting the information of the person who has requested this. Again, we can assign a task to IT, basically pass in all that information that was captured, and get either IT to approve it or reject it. And if they approve it, we can generate a new password. We can use the update user action to go and say I want to update the user's password, and then basically send an email to the person to say, hey, your password request has been processed, and here is the temporary password for you to log in. So a very simple scenario, and it shows you how you can automate some of these small mundane tasks using Zenphi. So that brings us to the conclusion of this webinar. We have gone slightly above allocated time. So let me switch back to the slides. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar and staying till the end. I hope you found it interesting, and you could see the possibilities that Zenphi unlocks. I would encourage everyone to sign up for an account by going to zenphi.com and clicking on the sign up button there, and try out the Google Workspace Admin template so that you can get started and customize it to suit your specific business requirements. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and one of our teammates will be more than glad to help you out. So we are at the Q&A time. Mindful that we're a bit over. I'll quickly just go through a couple of questions. So there's one question saying, how are errors handled and error tracing accomplished? So Zenphi has built-in error retry policy. So if you have an action now, sometimes when you're calling services, you could have transient errors, and that could fail. So you can configure retry policies on the actions to say if it fails, retry in 1 minute, retry in 2 minutes, etc. And if a flow fails, you have possibilities to go and retry the failed step manually, or even to rerun the entire flow again with the same input trigger values. So there are quite a few options to use in terms of error handling. And the next one is please explain your pricing system. We are just trying to figure out what the plan we would need. That's a great question. So we have three pricing tiers. We have Essentials, Professional, and Enterprise. So in Essentials, you're only limited to having one flow designer. Uh, you can still have unlimited participants that you can assign tasks to, etc. But the limitation is one flow designer. In a professional plan, you can have unlimited designers in your workspace so you can collaborate and build. You also get access to things like Zenphi tables, dashboards, AI models, etc. And our enterprise plan is basically if you're doing a large scale deployment, it's a custom plan. You reach out to us, and our sales staff will work with you to craft a bespoke plan for you guys. So there's more information on our website, but if you have any specific questions regarding pricing, please send us an email or get in touch with someone, and we're more than happy to clarify that for you. So for the remaining questions, we will get back to you guys by email. And so, once again, thank you very much for joining us, and hope everyone has a wonderful day ahead. Thanks. Bye.